Hey, what's up, DLLS Mavs Nation? It's your man, Kevin Gray, alongside Mavericks beat writer Tim Cato and our national NBA insider, Marc Stein. Of course, we are DLLS Mavs. Really appreciate you joining us here on DLLS Sports. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe while you are here as well. Got to have some conversation around Luka Dončić. Luka Dončić, of course, suffering a left calf strain on Christmas Day against the Minnesota Timberwolves in that loss, as Kyrie Irving had 39 points in the attempted comeback. The Mavericks, of course, were down by as many as 28 points, coming up short in that game. But the story, gentlemen, coming out of the game, Luka Dončić leaving the first half with 2:31 left with the left calf strain. He will now be missing up to at least a month with that left calf strain. We'll start with our national NBA insider, Marc Stein. You can always dial up the Stein line at the Stein line. Marc, let's start with the latest on Dončić with the injury and the timeline that we're looking at with him here as the Mavericks look to move forward without their superstar here.
Yeah, Kev, they know they're going to be without him for at least a month. And realistically, even if everything went swimmingly from a rehab process during that month, there has to be getting back on the practice floor and a ramp up. So look, there's 3 games left in December. There's 16 games in January. I mean, I can't imagine him playing in any of those realistically, because this is not the first time he's had to deal with a calf strain. This has literally been something that's plagued him since the day before the season. But in this case, with the initial prognosis that it's going to be a month before they reevaluate him, I mean, it tells you that this really is, it's the longest term injury that Luka Dončić has ever faced in his Mavericks career. Now, obviously, we weren't there in Spain, but I really don't think there was anything in his Real Madrid career of this severity. But as a Mav, you know, the Mavs have gotten accustomed to him missing 10 to 15 games a season. But this is going to be 15 to 20 games in one consecutive stretch. So it's going to be a long, difficult, challenging period for this team. The only thing you can really say is, I mean, this is why they overloaded on guards. They came into this season knowing, as great as Kyrie Irving was last year, he played in 58 games. Luka historically has ended up in the 60s in his games. This is why they signed Spencer Dinwiddie after already having a pretty deep roster and getting Quentin Grimes back in the Tim Hardaway Jr. trade. They wanted to have as many guards as possible to insulate themselves as best as they could. There is no replacing Luka Dončić. Nobody can. But, you know, we'll see now if the Mavericks' vaunted depth can handle what this injury is thrown at them.
And Marc, as far as you know, the roster as is what Dallas is looking at to replace him. Obviously, in the past when he's been injured, you know, they have had 10-day players come in, situations like that. But like you said, this is a deeper team. You know, as things stand, as far as you know, the plan is to replace him in-house because there is that depth that they did bring into the season.
Yeah, look, we've talked about this before, that if they could upgrade in the front court before the February 6th trade deadline, I think they would like to do that. Now, I mean, again, there's not like there's some answer on the trade market that you can find to replace Luka Dončić. I mean, you have to consider all your options, certainly. Now, ideally, Dante Exum would return in January, but there is no firm indication yet. There's no timeline for Dante Exum's return. I checked on it again after the Luka calf strain on Christmas Day, and the consistent word you hear is he's improving. But beyond Dante Exum improving, there is still no timeline for his return. When he underwent the wrist surgery, the initial thought was he would miss 3 months. It's obviously gone beyond that. So can Dante Exum make a comeback in the month of January? I think that would probably be as an ideal, a fill-in move as the Mavericks can manufacture. I mean, this is a team with, limited trade assets as it is at this point. So I really don't see them trying to, force something in the next 40 odd days before the trade deadline, because again, they came into this season with 6 guards. And so they need, and Najee Marshall doesn't even count as one of those. And we saw when Luka has missed time before, Najee Marshall played probably the best basketball of his life. So can he get back to that level? Can he replicate? Can Najee replicate what he was doing earlier this month? I mean, that would also be as great an answer as the Mavericks can manufacture here to deal with this injury crisis.
Dončić, of course, averaging over 28 points per game, nearly 8 assists per contest, over 8 rebounds per game this year, and also 2 steals per game, which is tied for second in the NBA at the time of his injury. And Tim, this is a player that has played a ton of basketball over the last 4 years. We've detailed it a little bit in terms of the amount of times he has dealt with this specific injury alone to the left calf, but it just underscores not only the wear and tear that he has suffered over the last several years, but how much basketball he's played and what that has meant now, obviously dealing with it, yet another calf injury going forward here.
Yeah, so he goes to the NBA bubble in 2020, and they play their first game July 31st. They end up playing 13 games. He gets about 3 months off, but then the season starts back up in that December. He goes until June of 2021. That's 71 more games. He gets about 3 weeks off. He goes and plays 14 games over that summer, starting on June 29th, 2021, with Slovenia and various qualifiers. October 21, that's the first regular season game for the Mavericks once again for the 21-22 season. He plays another 80 games. He gets a couple months off. He plays Eurobasket. That's delayed a year because of COVID. But that goes from September 1st to September 14th. That's 2 weeks. Obviously, you're in training camp for several weeks before that. He plays 7 more games there, 7 games in 14 days. The 22-23 season starts. He plays 66 games. He gets a few months off, and then he goes to the FIBA World Cup in the Philippines. The first game is on August 26th. The last game is on September 6th. That's 8 more games. He gets a couple weeks off. He reports for training camp, October to June, because the Mavericks go to the NBA Finals. That's 92 games that he plays, for the Mavericks. He plays 3 games over the summer with at Olympic qualifiers. Slovenia does not qualify, so he at least gets a reprieve in that sense. He had a few months off before the season. This is his job. Most of us have to work every month of the calendar year. This is not a pity party, but it is a fact. It is a reality that he has played so much basketball. At the same time, almost all of those years, I have heard people talk about how he's, I've heard from Mavericks, he's playing himself back into shape. The conditioning isn't quite where you want it to be. This is a nuanced situation. I don't know. Nobody is saying, nobody can say, maybe outside of the Mavericks organization, maybe outside of Luka himself, they can say, oh, all of these games led to this injury, the one he's suffering right now. Nobody can say, oh, well, if he just, committed himself to a cryogenic chamber, for 90% of his non-basketball hours, he would be perfectly healthy right now. We don't know, but all of these factors, the combination of the fact that sometimes, his off-court habits have been lax, stuff that he's admitted, stuff he's talked about, in the same vein that he has struggled with how much he talks to referees, stuff like that. He has said that this can be a little bit more consistent and, in his off-court life. But at the same time, there is so much basketball that the big basketball has put him through. Just the meat grinder of game after game after game in different countries and different continents, on the NBA court, back-to-backs in different cities, flying here, flying there. This is a tough profession. This is a really hard profession. Luka is the first percentile, not just of, basketball players or 99th percentile of basketball players, but also of what he's asked to do on the court, playing more minutes, doing more, carrying more burden. This is tough. I don't know any other way to look at this injury and just think that it's a culmination of everything that brought him here, thus far in his career.
I would also tack on to that, this season, he's had to deal with some injuries that, he took a kick in a pickup game on the day before media day. That led to the calf injury that cost him all of training camp. More recently, that Golden State game in which he played so well. He took an inadvertent kick in that game. That led to a heel contusion. And look, I think we all, the rumbles were maybe he plays against Portland. There's no way he's going to miss the Christmas Day game. He did make it back for Portland because that is his nature. He always wants to play.
Right.
And until we speak to him, we're not going to know. But something tells me that it's going to come up. Hey, the heel contusion. Do you wish you took longer dealing with that? Because, he did make it back in time for the game before Christmas. But I have to say, he looked really good against Portland. And talking to scouts who've been coming to some of these recent games in Dallas, I've heard multiple scouts say, Luka looks really good physically. And I thought especially in the Portland game and leading up to the injury against Minnesota, he looked joyous out there. I mean, he looked really happy to be out there. And it looked to me like he was really getting back to the level that he expects for himself. And so for this to happen, the way it happened, just out of the blue, planting on what looked like a step back when, I mean, you saw him, talking trash to Julius Randle early. I mean, he was feeling it in that game. And so for it to happen so suddenly, I mean, it's a shock that the Mavs are, I mean, there's no sense whining about it or complaining about it. They're going to have to deal with it. And naturally, there's going to be concern about what this means for Kyrie now, because Kyrie Irving played in only 58 games last season. He's played in 27 of 20, or he's played, 28 out of 30 games this year.
27,
so,
27
out of 30. So, I mean, he has been a near ever-present this season, and obviously now a lot of this offensive burden is going to fall on him, but he has looked fantastic, and now it's just going to be a matter of how much can the Mavericks ask of Kyrie Irving, what is reasonable to foist upon him offensively, because, look, with both Luka and Kyrie, the eye is on April and beyond. As great as it would be to get a top 2-3 seed in the West, something the Mavericks have never enjoyed in the Luka Dončić era, that's not the priority at this point. They went to the finals. The priority is making sure that their two aces are healthy and as close to 100% as you can feasibly be in April, May, and June. And that's really, I think, the way the Mavericks are going to approach both Luka's recovery and how much they ask of Kyrie Irving with Luka out.
And speaking to Luka and him looking better, absolutely he did in the Portland game and the brief time he was on the court for against Minnesota. I think that's why he was so frustrated. If I can read body language, we talked about on the show about how that was as visibly frustrated after an injury. I think he knew that this was the longest. Like this was going to set him out for a while. Like you said, Mark, this is the longest injury he's ever faced in a Mavericks uniform. And I think he knew. Players know their bodies. Luka knows this injury. And the moment it happened, it was a combination of, surely because he was playing better, because everybody around the arena, everybody in the arena saw that he was playing better. Surely he knew or felt like he was, turning a corner, that the slow start this season was all going to be on the wayside and everything was going to be better. And then this happens. And so it's just a bummer. It sucks. It sucks for Dallas. They're going to have to survive, like you said, they're going to have to, quite possibly, put aside the concept that they're going to be a top 2, top 3 seed. That's something, already, Luka's going to have to put aside the fact that he's not going to make an all-NBA. He's not going to be an award winner. He's not going to be eligible. He's not going to be an all-NBA first teamer, for the, I believe, 6th straight season. There's already sacrifices that we know they're going to have to put aside. Quite possibly, very likely, they're also going to have to put aside, to an extent, the fact that this season was finally going to be the season where it clicked the entire way and they had home court and everything was really rolling for them going into the postseason. All advantages were on this side. Certainly, we've seen this team put it all together and really get in a rhythm towards the end of the year. It is absolutely possible, maybe likely, that happens again this season. But it is a reality that, it's going to be way harder to have those built-in advantages going into the postseason that you would like, and that we thought the season was maybe shaping up to be for the Mavericks.
The irony of this discussion that we're having comes on the 2-year anniversary of Luka Dončic's 60-21-10 game that he had against the New York Knicks, and what was an epic comeback and win in overtime against New York, where you were talking about the love and the joy that Luka has been playing with as of late. It was none more evident that particular night when he was able to have what was one of the best games, if not the best game of his career, when you look at the all-around game that he had that night. And last couple of things we finish up before we get out of here, because you guys started to touch on, obviously, there will be discussion about him not making a first-team All-NBA for the 6th consecutive year because he won't necessarily qualify. The MVP discussion necessarily won't be there either because, again, not making the 65-game requirement to qualify for the regular season awards. But you guys started to mention, in terms of the schedule, a team that's 14-4 in their last 18 games, a team also that's 6-2 without Luka Dončić so far this year. This next stretch of games for them is going to be proving pretty difficult. They've got 5 of their next 6 games on the road. And then when you get to the beginning of the new year, beginning January 1st, you look at the first 16, 17 days of January, the Mavericks play against the Rockets, against the Cavaliers, the Grizzlies, the Lakers. They play the Nuggets twice, and then they see the Oklahoma City Thunder as well. This is not going to be an easy stretch. It was not going to be easy with Luka in the lineup, obviously. And Mark, you started to mention it when it came to Kyrie Irving, the offensive load that he's going to shoulder. It's not going to be just upon him. It's going to be on PJ Washington and others to really be able to hold this down, because the schedule does not lend itself to an easy time for this team moving forward here without Dončić.
Hey, January is no joke, Super Kev. I mean, look, in December now, especially with what the NBA Cup, it puts these interruptions into the calendar that we used to not see. So your workload in December, even for the Mavericks, who had to travel a ton, I still can't believe that stat about having only 4 home games in the space of 40 days. That is crazy talk. But even with that, they did have a stretch of days where, there were no games at all, and they were able to recharge. And December, again, crams 16 games into 31 days. It's like that for everybody. Nobody has an easy January. But yeah, I mean, this January, because the Mavericks won't have Luka Dončić, it's going to get infinitely harder. And again, I just think caution is going to prevail frequently here, because let's not act, they know they're getting him back. He's going to recover from this injury, and he's going to be back, February, whenever it is. So their eye will stay on the bigger picture, the long-term picture. He doesn't need to worry about the award stuff. Of course, he would love to make an MVP run, but Luka Dončić has already qualified for the Supermax by virtue of all his honors the past 2 seasons. So he's not losing anything contractually by not playing the 65 games this season. And it's the same thing with Kyrie Irving. Kyrie Irving has been so good that, to get him, as you said, 27 out of the first 30 games, don't overtax him. It might mean a loss here or two because you have to give him an occasional rest. But I just think the long-term picture is going to be in the Mavericks viewfinder at all times here, as opposed to we got to do as well in January as we can. It might mean a slip down the Western Conference board. And something else, I guess, to comfort them is there are so many other teams in the West that have struggled. Obviously, the 3 teams ahead of Dallas have been flying, but everybody beneath that, there are a lot of teams beneath the Mavericks in the standings right now who are in the 500 zone. They've been scuffling. I mean, Minnesota was great the other day here in building up a 28-point lead, but the Wolves had to hang on for dear life, and they showed up at 14-14, which is nowhere in the area what the Wolves expected to be after their trip to the conference finals. So, this is where, the West is brutal in the best of circumstances. It gets tougher, no question. January is going to be a really, really challenging month for this team, but I think they've already surprised us to a degree by going 6-2 without him. And so let's see what they can manage next month.
I've got my eyes on Najee Marshall. Can he replicate what he did a few weeks ago when Luka was out? Certainly eyeing Dante Exum's return. But Jaden Hardy is the other guy I'll leave us with. Is that this is to an extent it's almost a make or break for his Mavericks career. Like, this is a huge opportunity for him, and he's had chances. He hasn't had the best start to this season. He was hurt a little bit with an ankle sprain. He's back. He's available. He's healthy. There's going to be some real minutes and some big minutes for him coming up, and I'm very curious to see how he responds to that and whether he can be a stopgap solution. Obviously, no replacing Luka Dončić, but a stopgap solution for the team here in the next few weeks. That's something I'm gonna be watching.
Well, as Jason Kidd likes to say, it is the next man up mentality for this team, and no bigger time for that to take place now than with their superstar Luka Dončić missing what will be at least the next month with the left calf strain. We will keep you up to date on everything when it comes to this Mavericks team right here on DLLS Mavs. Make sure you follow our national NBA insider Marc Stein at the Steinline, our Mavericks beat writer Tim Cato at Tim_Cato when it comes to the latest for your Dallas Mavericks. Really appreciate you joining us here on DLLS Mavs. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to DLLS Sports here on YouTube, and also do the same for our podcast as well, wherever you get your podcasts for free. Marc Stein, Tim Cato, I'm Kevin Gray. We're DLLS Mavs. We'll talk to you later. Peace.
We all silly like the mayor.